All right, we're going to get started here. My name is Tim Stark. I'm the chairman of the Yellowstone County GOP. Typically, we have to bait people to come to our events, so you guys came with no food or no drinks, so this is awesome. But it just shows how much you guys are interested in learning more about the topic of public safety in our community. I just want to recognize anybody that is an elected official. Would you please stand? That includes Mr. Usher, too. He stood. Yeah. Anyways, we had started out a couple years ago with doing some informative forums like this. There was 3 panelists. Scott Schweida was one, Stacey, and a Border Patrol agent. And it was very eye-opening for the attendees on what they heard there that evening. And we wanted to do another forum like that and bring in people that were from our community that have experience from, criminal justice, the law enforcement, the attorney side, and just inform the public on, what's going on. So this is a time for, to learn where we're at, what we can do to improve it, and, ask tough questions. So hopefully this panel's ready for that. I'm going to hand it over to Mike, our treasurer. He is going to be the moderator this evening. The other, I want to point out that there are, I believe, at least 2 Montana Parole Board members here, Steve Hurd and Jimmy Patelis. Is Daryl here?
I got a couple smart Alex back here. I only got half a leg on one side. Stand all the way up.
No, thank you, gentlemen. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike here, and he's going to get things started.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. As Tim said, I'm Mike Shepley, treasurer for the YCRCC. And since I'm moderating, let me get into some introductions. But first, we can always talk safety first in terms of the building format and exits. Emergency exits only out the side here, out to the garden or courtyard area. If there's a need to exit the room, we'll exit out the back just like we came in. They will not be closing it off. I was told that there might be some tone that goes off at 8 o'clock to signify otherwise the closure of the facility, but it won't be. They're holding it open for us, so we're in good shape. So for this forum, the format is set up such that we'll have each of the speakers make their presentation. And we're ballparking 15 minutes for PowerPoints or whatever they plan to do. And at the end of that, we will hold the questions and answers. What we intend to do, and we've already done some of it, is pass out 3x5 cards to capture your thoughts, capture your questions. Please, on the card, write which speaker the question is directed to. And then the intent is I will read the questions later. So what that means, I can, over the microphone, read it so everybody will hear the question and they will be directed to the speaker that we intend, and we'll get the responses. And we'll go as long as we can within reason for everybody, for the speakers and for the crowd. So my wife Barbara's walking around. She has more of the 3x5 cards, and she brought a box load of pens if anybody needs a pen as well. So with that, I think we're ready to roll on. We had the detailed bios printed up for each of the speakers. They were when you came in. If anybody else wants those, they are available. Otherwise, let me get on with the very brief intro, and then we'll get going. So our first speaker will be Stacey Zinn Britton. She's the regional agent in charge with the DEA. Next will be Brian Gutkin. He's the director of the Montana Department of Corrections, and he's a board member of the Montana Board of Crime Control. Third will be Barry Usher, Montana State Representative. He's chair of the Law and Justice Interim Committee and chair of the Criminal Justice Oversight Council. Fourth, we have Chief Rich St. John of the Billings Police Department. Fifth, we have Sheriff Mike Linder, Yellowstone County Sheriff. And wrapping up at number 6, Ed Zink, Deputy Chief County Attorney. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stacey. Thank you, Stacey.
So I might do my little stopwatch so I don't go over, because I can talk with pertaining to drugs. So my name is Stacey Zinn. I'm with DEA. I run DEA Montana. We have 3 offices here, which is in Billings, Great Falls, and Missoula. So we have a lot of territory. We don't have enough agents, but hopefully in the future we can try to rectify that and open up another office and get some more bodies here. The reason I believe that I am here tonight is actually to tell you why we have such high crime rate, and a lot of it stems from drug use. We are seeing an overabundance of drug use taking place. We're seeing more of the international flavors starting to hit our community. And what do I mean by that? We have Mexican cartels that are actually targeting our areas. And the reason why they're targeting our areas is because of the price markup. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. What I want to do is start my PowerPoint presentation here. If I can get it going here. Good. Let's see. Help me up here.
Quick so you can get your bottom. And then do your slideshow.
That would be great. Thank you. Okay, that took up a minute of my time there. So. Okay, so what I want to first point out is you'll see the yellow arrows that are indicating how the drug flow is coming up. You see them from the southwest border sources. The bulk, I would say, 97% of our drugs are coming from the southwest border. As we all know, the southwest border is wide open. What does that mean to us? Is that people can body carry, especially fentanyl pills, up through the corridor, up to their stash house location, and then it goes to all the way up through California is one route, Arizona is one route, hits to Denver, and then it comes up, continues up through Wyoming and Montana. Now, what these arrows are not reflecting, that a lot of times the drugs will come up all the way from California, all the way up to Washington, and they are legalizing small amounts of drugs. So what has taken place is that we're seeing some of the Mexican cartel sales actually transfer up there, and we see more stash houses over in that region. Why does that impact us? Because we have individuals here that it's a hop, skip, and a jump to just run over to Washington, pick up their drugs, and be back here within 6 to 8 hours. We also seen a lot more drugs coming through the mail, Postal Service, FedEx, and we're still seeing people just transporting drugs through hidden cargo spaces within automobiles. Not to sound really gross, but we'll see a lot of females that are actually body carrying pills. If they get stopped by law enforcement, no one knows that they had the pills on their persons. So these are methods of transporting drugs to our area. People ask me about interdiction stuff through Montana, and I'm saying Montana's wide open. We have interdiction teams, but we don't have enough bodies out there. Also, our state laws handcuffs us. I'll leave that to conversation off to the side, but we have tractor trailers bringing lots of kilos through our state and then going all the way up to Canada. We have lots of money flowing. As you can see, drugs will flow, marijuana will flow eastbound, monies are coming back westbound. When we do stop these individuals, if we're lucky enough, we'll find a bulk of money, and then we have to try to build our investigation from that. So our interstates are wide open. Y'all should know this, because in the future we need to learn how we can fix this. We need to look at Texas. We need to look at Idaho. They have very, very strong interdiction units, and their laws allow them to be able to make these stops and seize these assets and seize the drugs like they should be able to. Okay, so someone asked me today, is meth still king? Yes, meth is still king here. The price of meth is low right now, so we'll see more individuals going down to Denver, going into California, picking up their meth because it's very, very cheap pricing. Intel indicates that these prices are going to start going up because of cartels, who are the ones that make this product, across the southwest border, they realize that meth is at rock bottom prices. Again, they can triple the prices up here in Montana, but we should start seeing the prices start going up. What does that mean when it comes to crime? Is that if individuals don't have the money to get their meth, what are they going to do next? They're going to commit crime. They're going to start stealing. They're going to start robbing more. Meth is king on Indian reservations. We see that it's basically out of control. A lot of the reservations, like Crow Agency and Northern Cheyenne, the dope sits up here, the meth sits up here, because if it sits on the reservation, then they're going to rob each other. It's not safe down there. So we're starting to see more and more Native American influence up here with the stash houses, also the flop houses in our community. This is just examples, these little baggies. If you're ever at a park or if you're at a setting and you see these type of baggies, leave them on the ground. The reason why I say that, because even it looks like this is a this is a meth product, but if it's like crunched up, it could also actually be fentanyl. And if you don't know what it is, you pick it up, you actually inhale it, you can have a respiratory issue, and then you'll be going to the hospital after that. So if you see it, leave it on the ground, but just make note of it, including needles. If you do see it, if you do see needles, glove up, pick it up, dispose of it. This is just a makeshift pipe. If you ever come, if you have homes that you lease out, rentals and stuff, you ever see this behind, that means obviously they've been smoking meth in your houses. You've got to make sure that you clean them out. You got to get someone in there to really decontaminate that house, because what happens when you smoke meth, it permeates into the carpet, permeates into the paint. If you have a child, you rent it out to your next customer and they have an infant, they're crawling around, they get that exposure, they will test positive for meth. Heroin is here. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but this is just what heroin looks like. What took place was when prescription pills became very popular. Well, prescription pill prices jump up in our community. They jumped up to anywhere from $35 to $42 if they're ripping me off on the streets. Well, what the Mexican cartel recognized is that they wanted to get in on this, and they started flooding our community with heroin. And they started sending up little baggies that trying to see what my time is. They start sending out little baggies that, with the heroin cost anywhere from $7 to $14. So if you had a pill that's going to cost you $37, you have a baggie that's going to cost you $7 to $14, you can convert over to the baggie of heroin because it's the same type of high. That's how we saw the heroin start kicking into our community. But instead, now we're starting to see this. These are pictures of fake oxy pills. I also have my fake oxy pills over there. This is what is hitting our community right now. It's fake fentanyl. Well, excuse me, it's a combination of fentanyl and heroin mixed up. They pill press it. They put blue dye in it to make it look like an Oxy 30, and then they're sending them to our streets. You can make these for 4 cents down across the southwest border. In Denver, they'll charge you anywhere from $2 to 50 cents to $6 if you're buying in bulk. Up here in our community here, they were $30. They bounced back down to $22. But if I take these pills up to Wolf Point, I can probably sell them for now $82. I can jump it up to Rocky Boy, $89 to $100. If I take these pills up to Sidney, Montana, around that region, $120. So cents to make down the southwest border, big dollars to make on the northeastern part of Montana. Now, if you start seeing that, now you're recognizing the profits that these cartels are making. Right now, the cartels are flooding our area, flooding the United States of these pills. Also, the problem with these pills is that when you take a pill, you don't know how much fentanyl is in one product. It could be just a little bit chunk, so the individuals will take it, they'll smoke it or whatever, and they think, no big deal. They take another pill, half of that pill could be fentanyl. I just got intelligence that the Mexican cartel is now controlling the fentanyl trade down in the southwest border. They are now making it more potent. What is that going to mean for us up here? Is that individuals are going to be overdosing and dying. Our overdose deaths are skyrocketing. So just be cognitive of that. You see that penny right there? That little amount of fentanyl that's on the right-hand side of it? That's a lethal dose of fentanyl. These are just another example of the fake pills. These are called Xanax bars, people that take Xanax. You looking at that, you don't realize that's actually a fake fentanyl/heroin pill. Heroin pill, excuse me. And these, on those last two slides and this slide, these are the pills that were seized here in Montana. Again, just the left canister, lethal dose of heroin, middle canister, lethal dose of fentanyl, to the right, lethal dose of carfentanil. And carfentanil is we've had a case here where an individual was injecting himself. He didn't even get the plunger halfway. He died instantly. That will shut your respiratory system down. People ask, why are our individuals looking for this? Well, when you start taking that opiate, you get that euphoric feeling. Well, if you start taking it over and over and over again, you lose it. You don't get that initial high. It's called chasing the dragon. If you take and you add that fentanyl to it, you get that wow, that euphoric feeling again. And that's why we're seeing individuals on the street, give me the fake pills, give me the fentanyls, give me the Mexis, give me azolitas. That's what they're calling them. So it's something just to be cognitive about. But the problem with this, with the prices that are skyrocketing, it raises the crime level again because people can't sustain this type of drug. You can have a 2-pill day a habit. You're spending, let's say low amount of $22, $44. You got to multiply that by 7. You can't miss a dosage. So individuals will start then breaking into the homes, start stealing from shields or whatever. And what they'll do is they'll try trade merchandise. When we do a search warrant on the house, I always see stolen merchandise, and I know that they've just been robbing to support their habit. So there's so much I could go into, which I don't have enough time to, but what I wanted to stress here, and the reason, again, is that a lot of the drugs here are the crutch, they're the root of a lot of the criminal activity here. And it doesn't matter if it's on the west side, if it's on the south side, it's in the Heights, we have a drug problem. We are getting out there and trying to educate the population, we're trying to talk to the kids, but we need help. We need more law enforcement personnel. We need to educate our people more, and we need to get back to our roots of talking to our kids so they don't start at this trajectory of using drugs. And with the legalization of marijuana, I don't know that's going to hold in the future, but we got to start talking to them. So I'll take questions later on, or just pull me aside and say, hey, what's going on in this area or whatever. But thanks for taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you, Stacey. And next is Brian Gutten.
Good evening, everybody. Brian Goodkin, Director of the Department of Corrections. Little background, I was 27 years law enforcement with my peers over here with the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office, 8 of those years as the elected sheriff of Gallatin County. So public safety is near and dear to my heart, and it is our #1 priority in the Department of Corrections. How do I prove that? In my first year as the director, we reorganized the Department of Corrections into 3 divisions. First division is Public Safety Division, and how important do I think that is? I have our brand new Public Safety Chief, Jim Anderson, here with me. The second division is our Rehabilitation Division, and then our third division is Central Services Division. So what's unique about the Department of Corrections is not only do we have the awesome responsibility of public safety throughout the state, but then we have 14,000 offenders that our job is the complex, difficult, challenging job of rehabilitating those offenders so we don't have them come back into the system and reoffend and hurt our families and victimize our people. So that's how important we make it. And then the third leg of that of our world is Central Services. And why is that important? That's important because they're the people that collect the data. And I will tell you, 27 years in law enforcement, catching them, hooking them up, taking them to jail. This governor is very data driven, and I am a believer now. I think that in order for us to move forward and work collectively, we have to know the data, we have to collect it, we have to evaluate it, and that's where we get a strategic plan together to move forward collectively and work together to fix this incredible issue that you guys have in this community. So I'll tell you, when I first started, I think it was the first month that I was in this job. I came to Billings and I met with the chief, the sheriff, county attorney, and all of your district court judges just to sit and to listen to the issues that you guys have. We did the exact same thing today. Brought my public safety chief here. We had lunch with the county attorney, met with Chief St. John before this meeting, and then also had dinner with the city council and with local legislators. We are a partner, and we are here to work with you. We're going to show you a couple of slides. One of the things that we've heard loud and clear is that Billings is a dumping ground, and that we are sending all of our offenders to Billings. Again, that's emotional, and I understand the emotions that are involved with that. So what we did is I had our data team sit down and collect the data so we could show you the real numbers. Does that mean that our offenders are perfect and they're not reoffending? Absolutely not. Or that we're perfect? We're not. But what we need to do is we need to look at the reality of the data and then be able to work with these people, with our partners, to fix this and do everything that we can. So one thing that I will tell you right off the bat, Governor Gianforte and the legislature did a great job of allocating 14 brand new probation and parole positions. So we had 10 probation officers, 4 pre-sentence investigator positions. Immediately, we dedicated half of those total positions to the Region 4, which includes the city of Billings, because we knew that we knew the stresses and what you were dealing with, along with local law enforcement. So the governor made it crystal clear, along with Kurt Olney in the back, that we need to help you, and that's exactly what we're doing. Where are we with those people? I believe we have 2 of them hired, and we're working. The other 5 are in the hiring process. So we're getting those people on the ground to help you. Do you mind coming up and running this thing? So we'd like to show you just a few slides, and I'll try and walk them through. And what I really, can you hear me?
Yeah, just hold.
Do I have to? I am technically challenged, and my daughter's not here to help me.
Test. Yeah, just hold
All
it
right,
close.
all right, thank you. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about, and again, we can sit and debate and we can point fingers all we want. That doesn't do anyone any good. What we want to do is we want to look at this data. We're going to show you the data, and then what we want to do is I've already told the city this evening that we are going to dedicate our data team to sit down with the city's data team and the police department, whoever else wants to be at the table, to collectively look at it, and once they get it together, then to get it to the elected leaders to have a plan. And we want to be at that table.
Not sure what it's doing. Yeah, I know. Technically challenged. I'm not sure why it switched from the view.
Got any junior high students?
Yeah, you might need them.
We need a middle schooler?
My daughter's in Bozeman, so she can't help.
So I'm-
Oh, there it is, there it is.
Okay.
Got it.
All right. So one of the things that we've heard loud and clear is that Billings is the dumping ground. Department of Corrections is sending all of the offenders from all around the state to Billings and to Yellowstone County. So I asked our data people, get together, let's look at the numbers, and let's look at the statewide numbers to figure it out. And what this tells us is Region 4 is your region. And that is not just Billings. That's a huge region. How many counties is that, Katie?
11.
11 counties and a huge geographical area. Obviously, Billings is the most populated, and that's the biggest issue that we're dealing with. But if you look, the biggest numbers that we wanted to look at, 27% of the people that we are placing out from our department, our offenders, are going to Yellowstone County. 27%. This side is the number of convictions coming out of Yellowstone County. 27%. So you're getting exactly the number of people that you're convicting back into your neighborhoods. So I wanted to make sure to make that not to debate or to argue. I just wanted that I was actually surprised at that because I thought that those numbers would be higher. Next slide. So the other big thing that the chief and the sheriff will talk about is the sexual and violent offenders. What a lot of people don't understand and don't know is that our hands are tied. There are only 3 places in the state that we can put sexual offenders, and that is Billings, Helena, and Missoula. So we have no discretion. Those are the 3 locations that we can take and put those sexual offenders. We can put violent offenders throughout the state. So as you can see, we have, this is again, Region 4, 86% are non-sexual or violent offenders. 86% of the people that we're placing here. Violent offenders are 11%, sexual offenders are 2%. And then you have both sexual and violent, which is less than 1%. Now, that sounds like a low number. That's the population we have to focus on, and that we are. Next slide. So our conditional releases, that's one of the things that we talk about quite a bit. And you're going to see a pattern, which is so interesting about the data and the data collection. The patterns are almost identical as we go through. So again, as you're looking for population by SVO, which is sexual violent offender status, current community parole population broke out by sexual and violent offender, right up in A, we're looking at 88% non-sexual or violent, about 11% as the violent offender, and again, right about 1% for the sexual offender. B is the population by region of sentencing court. So we're talking again, this is Region 4, 72% convicted. And then those are the other regions throughout the state showing you where those people are convicted out of. C is the male population by risk management score. We're not going to talk about that one. We couldn't delete it, but this isn't really applicable. But this one right here is, and what we're talking about is those high risk, the people that we're trying to focus on. And again, 39% are the moderate, and then your low risk is 51%. So this is the part that we focus our energy on, is that 11% that are high risk to reoffend. Next. Our pre-release centers, our partners, they're a huge part of what we do. So the majority of people, and you know what, I should have started by saying 14,000 offenders in the care of the Department of Corrections. Only 2,500 of those are in prisons. The rest of those people are out in the communities, in our pre-release centers, in our treatment centers. That's that leg. That's that trying to get them back into the community, but there needs to be that step down to help them so they succeed. So with that, as you can see, again, 83% are non-sexual or violent offenders in the pre-release centers. Sexual is 2%, a little bit less than 2%, a little over 15% on violent. The population by, and this is the board, and this is another thing that I wanted to clarify, and that's why I'm glad that Steve and Jimmy are here. So the Board of Pardon Parole, a lot of people think that they're a part of the Department of Corrections. They are attached to us, but we have absolutely no authority. Steve and his crew are autonomous. They're the ones that parole people from the prisons into the communities, and then our probation and parole people are in charge of them from there to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So this is the Board of Pardons and Parole decisions, and then the rest are us. So 19% are coming from parole. The rest of them are coming from the Department of Corrections. Population by region of sentencing court. So again, the sentencing court, where they're coming from, this is your region right here, 44% that are going into pre-release centers from Yellowstone County courts. And then the last one is population by commit status. And again, that's about 87% are those, or 80% of those are the DOC commit. And then all of these are the other deferred, dual commitment, MSP commit, MWP, MSP Montana State Prison, MWP Montana Women's Prison. Next. Probation and parole, so that's the hot topic, right? That's the one, that's our boots on the ground that are working with local law enforcement. We're the ones that are supposed to be keeping, and we are watching these offenders, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And the big issue during the legislative session was caseloads, and that's another huge reason, huge caseloads here in Billings. Governor's like, put the people where they need to go, and that's what we did. So, population by sexual violent offender status, A. Right over here you can see 87%. Again, pattern, right? We can see the pattern of these charts. Violent offenders and sexual offenders, less, but still a high number. B is the population of region of sentencing court. Again, region 4, 73% approximately right there. And I really wanted, my data people love numbers. I think there were 100 pages to this thing. We pared it down to try and not kill you by PowerPoint. But those are the numbers for region 4. C, male population by risk assessment score. Again, who has the highest risk of reoffending and hurting people? That's our major focus. 60% right there are low, 30% are moderate, and then this is the number that we focus on, and that's the high is actually about less than 1%, and then, or I'm sorry, the very high is less than 1%. The high is right at about 10%, a little less than 10%. And D is offender is supervised in Montana through interstate compact. I don't think we need to talk about those because those numbers are really low. So next slide. Talked about that. Okay, yeah, and if anybody has any questions about parole, you can talk to Steve. Next.
That's it?
Great, and so in closing, I just want to reiterate, 27 years of law enforcement, public safety is absolutely our number one mission, but with that complex job of also trying to fix them so they don't come back. And we're reevaluating everything. We're bringing people, we have great people inside, we're bringing people from the outside, and really asking questions of why do we do this, and I hear the answer a lot of, well, because we always have. Well, that's unacceptable. So I'll be available for questions.
Thank you, Brian. And next is Barry Usher. Yeah, Barry, feel free to, however you want to do this.
Well, I was told we were doing it this way, and I don't have a presentation, so, and I'm going to try and be quick so we can get more questions in later. But I'm Barry Usher from House District 40, which is actually anything north of Laurel, north of Billings, in Yellowstone County and all of Muscle County. Little correction, I was the chair of Judiciary Committee during the session, and during this interim, which is between sessions, I'm the chairman of the Criminal Justice Oversight Council, and I'm just a member of the Law and Justice Interim Committee. Is that better?
There we go.
Okay. So I was asked to give an update what we're doing on the state side. Wanted to make sure to mention that at least Tom McGilvery's here, and I was hoping that Bill Mercer was going to be here. Everything I'm talking about, I've worked with those two and talked to very closely to make sure that we are trying to bring these up in our committees. Bill is not on the policy side, he's on the appropriation side in the criminal justice, it's called Section D. He's great to work with too, but we need appropriations and policy both to work together to get things accomplished. So Criminal Justice Oversight Council was created after the during the 2017 session to follow up on all the criminal justice reinvestment bills that we passed in 2017. This was a pile of bills that we were promised that we're going to fix the world in criminal justice. Needless to say, I'll tell you a little bit more later about that. But anyway, so it's made up of 4 legislators, 2 senators, 2 House members, and a judge, county attorney, sheriff, parole, and probation, Jimmy Patelis is on that, and some people from treatment. What we're working on this session, or this interim, is we're working on, our next meeting's Tuesday, the 18th, up in Helena. We're going to talk about drug courts, how successful they're being or not. We're also getting an update from the Supreme Court pretrial diversion pilot project. This is a project, I believe it's 5 counties, where every felony from those counties, their case is sent to a group of people up at the Supreme Court or court administrator's office, and they do an assessment based on criminal history, the crime that they currently committed. There's a tool that they go through, and they give the judge that by the next morning they give them a score, and basically the score is supposed to help them decide whether or not they're going to be maybe reoffending before they show up at court, or whether or not they're even going to show up for court. So it's a tool. Like I said, it's been a pilot since 2017. My concern with that, and being in the legislature fighting with the courts right now, is that they want to get away with trying to convince us to get away with bail, no bail for anybody, kind of like California, Chicago, New York, which myself and our county attorney, Scott Twido, are going to fight. We'll fight, trust me. The other thing we're working on is sober living housing. We've heard that that's a big issue in Billings. It's not a big issue around the state. A couple other cities have a few sober living housing or homes, and they are concerned about them. They're concerned that they're going to get as bad as us, and I'm not sure if the chief's going to talk about them too much. But real quickly, what they are is they promote themselves that they can take people from prison on parole and probation, or even anybody, and they have treatment for them, and they get to live with other people who have said that they're going to stay sober and they need help. Some of these get more police calls than any other residents in our community. They also may stack 3-4 people in a bedroom, so they might have 10, 12 people in a house. And then sometimes, and I know from personal experience, that there's drugs being sold out of some of them, or they're being convinced to help with that. So they're not a good thing the way they are, so we're working on trying to figure out how we can corral that into what they're supposed to be and have treatment for them, and only help those people that want help, because you can't help somebody that doesn't want help. So we're working on that. Hopefully we'll have a bill next session. The other thing we didn't talk about, or Director Gukin didn't talk about, is we're looking at DOC's 3.5 program, which is a program that they assess people when they come into the prison and decide if they have a substance abuse program. And I'm being real quick on this. We think that they need to assess them before they leave or before they go to parole and probation, because right now we have a backlog of over 700 people, and some of those people don't need to be on that waiting list. And then the Law and Justice Interim Committee is all legislators. It's bipartisan, senators and representatives. Our next meeting is Wednesday, 19th. We're working on a couple study bills: inmate phone call costs, criminal commitment, which is basically our insanity plea. In the state of Montana, we don't have an insanity plea. The only time insanity comes in is with somebody competent enough to stand trial, and do they understand what's going on. And it also comes in when sentencing comes up on where they get sentenced to. I actually got to go in front of the Judicial Psychiatry Association, and before I was supposed to speak about our bill, and I had never heard about our law, so I got some good schooling in about a week's notice to go present in front of a bunch of judges and psychiatrists. So we're also working on department oversight. We have department oversight on the Attorney General's office, Department of Corrections, Judiciary, all of the judiciary from the Supreme Court down. And then the biggest one we're working on is this data study, and I'll get that in a second, a little bit more. But I don't know how my time's doing, okay. So the bills that I personally am working on, I was asked to answer that question. I'm working on the sober living housing bill. They would be self-regulated from their industry oversight, from their industry association, I guess. Also, I have some support I ran a bill last session, and I may do it again, DOC commits. Director Gukin mentioned that, basically that we all vote judges in, and we believe that judges convict or not convict, and then they sentence. Well, they don't sentence our people most of the time. I think he said DOC commit was over 80% of the people. DOC commit says, a judge says, I sentence you to 5 years, DOC commit. And then he hands them over to DOC, and DOC does whatever they want to do with them. That's put them back out in the community, that's put them in a substance program, that's put them in prison, wherever they're going to put them for that amount of time or even less. I don't believe that that should be done by non-elected bureaucrats. I believe that we all, probably everybody in here, thinks that a judge is sentencing people, and we should hold them accountable for how those people are sentenced. And so I believe we need to repeal that, and it's been in place for about 30 years in the state of Montana. I've done a lot of research too, and we're the only state in the country that does that. And because it's so good, we've got a lot of states lining up to follow us. The other one is a bill committed to working on cleaning up the 2017 Criminal Justice Reinvestment Act, or bills. I'm working with, or we were working with the County Attorneys Association, Sheriff's Association, asking them to get back to us. As you'll hear from law enforcement, in 2007, we really were sold a bill of goods, and we were told this was going to correct everything in criminal justice, and those bills did not. There's a lot of problems with them. I'll let law enforcement talk about that. And then the biggest one that I'm working on, I have a passion for, and also one of the committees I mentioned is working on is data repository bill. Basically, same thing that they just talked about, bringing the data from DOC in the city. I want to bring the data from first contact to law enforcement till somebody goes out on parole and they're done with parole, they're off of any supervision. I think we need that data. I think data is the next oil. If we have the data, we can answer the questions and figure out what the best solutions are, whether or not it's treatment, whether or not it's prison, whether or not it's a halfway house, whether or not it's a sober living house. Unless we have the data that proves and substantiates what we're saying, all we're doing is shooting shotguns. And it may hit, it may not hit, and we don't have any data. Every agency from law enforcement to county attorneys, the judiciary, DOC, parole and probation, everybody's got a different software system, and we need one software system or repository so we can take that aggregate data to get the information out, to answer the questions, to make the right decisions, so we can come back to the citizens of Montana and say, we spent your money wisely because we had the right answers. Last thing, two last things. I passed a bill this past time because medical marijuana, or recreational marijuana passed, about the canines and spending money to retrain those canines. I'm trying to propose that we redirect those canines to go to way stations. That'll take care of Stacey's issue of drug trafficking, because anybody coming through there is not allowed to have a drug of any kind, recreational or medical, in their vehicles. Also, schools, not allowed to have drugs in schools, so why can't we have a canine dog? And prisons, not supposed to have drugs in there. There are, but. And the last thing real quick, I am a member of National Conference of State Legislators, which is our conference for all legislators across the country, and I'm their vice chair of law and justice, so I get to travel with them around the country to look at what other jurisdictions are doing. So that's how I'm learning, trying to grow and listen to everybody and get good ideas and bring them back here. Again, I said last thing, but the last thing is I'm actually running for Senate. So myself and Sheriff Linder are the only ones up here running this year. So I have my campaign stuff if you want it. I'm not allowed to put it on the table, but I can hand it out.
Anybody have one that they like?
Next will be Chief St. John, once we get the PowerPoint going. I was trying to tab to get to it, but I can only tab. Yeah, I don't see, because it shows up on the screen. It's like it's a split screen. Yeah, it's on the screen, but it's not here.
Anybody else?
I'm sorry.
Anybody know how to find a cursor? It's up here, but not here.
It's because it does dual display.
Wing it?
You may, sorry. Come into that. There we go. Sorry, I had to fight it like that. There you go.
All right, how many highly paid professionals take to get a PowerPoint going? Quite a few. Well, thank you for coming tonight. I can say that over the last year, we probably did city staff 40 to 50 public safety presentations in preparation for a vote. We never had this many people in any of our safety levy talks, but we're not asking for money this time, so I can see the difference. That'd be yet. So, well, again, thanks for having me here. Start off with a picture of a pristine police car. This is what they look like before a young officer slides through an icy intersection and wrecks it. And then, yeah, they get to drive it. So and the impetus for the safety levy and things that have been coming a long time, and what you're going to hear, a lot of common themes from everybody that has spoken so far. And we deal with a lot of stuff as well. But what really jumped out over the last few years, and it didn't just get here, it's been slowly increasing, is our violent crime. And so what you can see here over the course of 3 years, 19 through 21, 21's just a little bit short of a full month, but you can get the idea of the volume of cases and the seriousness that your officers are dealing with. And this is just in Billings. This doesn't include what Sheriff Linder's troops are doing. So in the upper left-hand corner, you're seeing PFMA, which is partner family member assault. It's the old domestic abuse. I mean, this is a serious thing. We got, spouses that are assaulting each other, and this is a misdemeanor offense. They don't have a serious bodily injury, but, I mean, it's threats, it's tearing the phone off the wall, all of that's a slapping, whatever the case may be. And you can see the increase in that. And this is, so we have to look at the root cause. What's going on here? I mean, you look back to, do we have broken families? Do we have young men who didn't have a role model, that don't know how to properly, treat women? And so again, when you look at my job description, social services, that's not it. We enforce the law. But we're having to deal with the ramifications. And you can see that this is a significant issue. And it's taking place 99% in one's home. And that is absolutely tough to deter unless you're standing in the kitchen. So we have to look at root causes as we do that. Moving across to the right side, one of the great legislative acts that came out a while back was upgrading the PFMA strangulation and making it a standalone statute. We saw that in a lot of the domestic abuse cases, strangulation was part of it. And back in the day, it doesn't matter. I mean, knock her out, push her, fat lip, strangle. If it was first offense, second offense is a misdemeanor. The injuries are horrendous and potentially life-threatening. And so we have a standalone statute. And so look at those numbers. You have, the increases. Again, we don't have a full year of 21 stats there, but those are 117 of let's just say, 99% females that are getting choked out. I mean, that is totally unacceptable, and it's appropriate that it's charged as a felony. And so that ends up, and I think Mr. Zink might touch on some of those. But again, it's taking place primarily in the confines of one's home. You don't see this happening a lot out in public. Middle on the left, and this, of course, is concerning to everybody who wears a uniform, and I think it's indicative, too, of the environment that we're seeing nationwide. You certainly have people who are emboldened. They are, they're disrespectful. They don't listen to authority. If Steve Hurd were up here, he'd say it's the plate in my head, but he doesn't have the microphone. Yeah, I know. So the assaults on the police officer really go in line with the attitude that we're seeing nationwide, and we're not immune to it. But it's very, very disturbing that you have individuals that fail to obey a lawful order. They resist, they fight, and they end up assaulting our officers. Totally unacceptable. And you can see the increase. It's 189% over 3 years. 189% of your officers, and I would imagine the sheriff's, the whole thing. Director Gookins, his corrections officers are getting assaulted as well. Assault with a weapon. This is a big thing that jumps out and really correlates with our attempted homicides and our homicides, is that, we've seen a steady increase in people assaulting each other, but it has really jumped up with the propensity to use a weapon of some sort, and most of it is a firearm. And of course, concerning to us is who has the firearm and how did they get it. We have significant burglaries, significant thefts, cars getting broken into where we're losing firearms. And so, again, and it just all ties into, I'm asking Director Gookin and his staff, how come one of your, people that you're supposed to be in charge of has got arrested again and they have a gun? And these are the conversations that we have to try to sort through this. Bottom left, aggravated assault, life-threatening, not necessarily with a weapon. You can see that went down. And then our homicides. We had a terrible, terrible year in 2020. And so 2021, we finished out with 9. I will tell you, every one of those has been solved, which is good. And the other thing I will say is that the great majority of our aggravated assaults and our homicides, everybody knows each other. So we have very few random acts of violence. The terrible situation that spilled into the West End started at the KOA, Laurel, and ended up there. That was a random act of violence. It ends up in the sheriff's area because that's in the county, but we don't see that very often. If we saw random acts of violence, there'd probably be triple the number of people here. Triple. So I guess in a good way, they know each other, but in a bad way, we got 9 people who lost their lives, and we had a bunch of people that got assaulted. So one thing I was asked to kind of touch on, and again, 10,000 foot level, and everybody's already touched on this a little bit. What, from the police department standpoint, could I ask from the legislature, current and future, and then our state partners? Well, again, we need to restore some balance to the criminal justice system. The perception that the criminals are getting better treatment than the victims prevails out there, and we need to get some balance. And again, it goes to what Representative Usher talked about. We just can't throw everybody in jail. I mean, I would like to do that, but that's not feasible. So we got to get some balance in how we do things. The entire system needs to be fully funded, or at least appropriately funded, so it meets the expectations of the citizens. All right, I think everybody in here knows that we can solve a whole bunch of problems with, how you doing, buddy?
How's Chief St. John doing?
I'm doing well. How about you go to the, kind of,
Man, that golden there, and this guy's the golden, man.
You bet.
He cares, yeah? Joseph Wilson, nose and lip, yeah?
I'm gonna finish up talking, I'll
All
go
right.
with you. No,
But that's my good buddy.
Yeah, well, you can talk to him after the presentation.
Okay.
Come with me.
thanks, buddy.
Hey, yeah, and he's a good guy. He knows what he's talking about.
See ya.
Help us, you know? Thanks for coming back. Chief St. John.
Denver Bronco guy. Hey, I'll talk to you later. Thanks for coming up there. So,
No, he's not one of ours.
so in any case, I think what I was saying before I brought him in to break it up a little bit.
That was your plan, wasn't
It was my plan, so I was hoping you guys would take a bathroom break and I could finish up, so. No, I think everybody in here knows that there is no problem we can't solve if we throw enough money at it. Well, that's not happening. I mean, we keep going to the voters, they've been really good to us. State's got issues, the whole 9 yards. But, we need to work to try to make sure that our citizens are getting what they expect from government across the board, local, state, and even federal. And essentially it's capacity. The director said it, and I think the sheriff's going to say it. He will now because I'm going to make him, but there's absolutely no blame here. It is a capacity issue for everybody. It's a capacity issue for everybody. Everybody's working very, very hard to get a handle on their respective problematic area. But, we could always use more officers, certainly more jail space, certainly more programs for Department of Corrections. It's a capacity, more public defenders, more judges, more prosecutors. So we're not going to get a whole bunch of that, so we need to get creative on what we're doing. Things like this really, really, helps drive us down that direction. So again, we're not blaming anybody for anything. We're all working very hard on this thing, and hopefully we get some stuff done. The representative talked about this. From a street level, we are asking you legislators, would you please revisit justice reinvestment? Please, all right? There's some problematic areas there and unintended consequences. I don't think anybody set out to dump 34 sober houses with 20-something people in a house in Billings. I don't think that that's what they're thinking, but, loopholes, whatever, and people are smart. House Bill 133, reduced penalties for stuff. That's problematic. You think you're doing people a favor, and you're not. And there's no cost savings. Where does the cost go? The cost got shifted to the locals, and we got hammered, and now police chief's out asking for a second safety levy. Okay, and then, so the housing part is 62. Felon in possession of firearm, again. And I think Mr. Zink might touch on that, but you basically had statutes that gutted our ability to charge, arrest, do things with felons in possession. I'm going to guess, I didn't do the numbers, that a few of the people who committed our aggravated assault with the weapons, aggravated assault, and homicides might have been convicted felons. Okay, and I don't know, but again, we need to give our prosecutors some leverage and a persistent felony offender status as well. That was something, a tool that our attorneys used. Is always something they could come down and hammer somebody with. I think that Mr. Zink will address that as well. So this is a result of the reduced penalty. All right, so this is what a misdemeanor, several misdemeanor shopliftings look like, where they don't go to jail, they don't get arrested. If we catch them, they get a traffic ticket. That is over $100,000 of tools from Lowe's or Home Depot that two individuals just loaded up into a shopping cart and walked out the door. Okay? You end up paying that when they raise the price on your DeWalt drill or whatever. And hard to believe, I mean, I even did crime fighting at TJ Maxx, suffering through my wife's Christmas shopping. The same thing was happening. Two individuals had two shopping carts filled. Manager recognized me and said, that's the fourth day in a row they've been in here. They just walk out the door. They just walk out the door. Because they know what the limit is. It's extremely high. They know they're not going to jail for various reasons the sheriff will touch on. But this is what happens, and I know it wasn't intended. We can fix it. Representative can fix it, all by himself. All right, in closing, again, it's a local thing. And so, what are we considering? We need to maintain the continued public support. And the fact that those of you who voted for the safety levy, not once, but twice, $11 million in perpetuity, not all to the police department, speaks volumes of A, what you realize the problem being, and B, what you think of your public safety. That is huge. We need to maintain that trust, and we need to produce on the stuff that we're doing, and we will. Obviously, solving the jail issues. We could talk until midnight or whatever on stuff with that. And again, we don't own the jail. It's a county facility. The sheriff runs it. But we are intrinsically linked on, people going there. That's where they go. That's where they go if they need to. Again, I think I'm very proud of our judges here locally. A little bit in line with what the representative said is that, when they hand out sentences of people to go to jail, they're holding people accountable. They're not letting the criminals thumb their nose. And we want to make sure and recognize that everybody here is doing everything they can to hold people accountable for what they're doing. Public health, methamphetamine, fentanyl, Stacey talked about. It's a public health crisis that's resulting in criminal activity. And all of the stuff we get into, our homicides, all the way through even our officer-involved shootings, methamphetamine is the common denominator. And so everything she said spills here and is problematic to deal with. And of course, we're partnered up. Again, I'm not a social worker. My cops aren't a social worker. But we get called as the Swiss Army knife to deal with social issues. And so we are working very closely with our social working partners to deal with the outreach, the prevention, divert them out of the system so they don't end up in the sheriff's jail and get treatment, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes along with that. And then for us, okay, we know that if you add more officers and we use advanced techniques, it's going to reduce crime. We know that. Safety levy allowed us to do that, allowed us to add officers, and that thing's online if you want to read it. We are truly focused to deter the worst crimes by the most dangerous people. All right, we have groups internally. We belong to Project Safe Neighborhood, which Kurt Alme, who's sitting in the back, got going. It is a local, state, federal task force going after the worst of the worst, and it put a dent in their business for a little while. And then, of course, quality policing matters. So I just can't go out and be heavy-handed and start doing a bunch of stuff because I'm going to lose the community. So can't be overbroad or aggressive and maintain those relationships. And I will tell you, I'm not offering any excuses. Public safety is our responsibility, and we're going to provide it to you. We're going to provide it to you with the resources that you gave us, and I'm going to do it with the partnership, everybody at the table and everybody in the room. And the questions I know will follow, so thank you.
Thank you. Yep. And now Sheriff Linder.
Can we take one of the hand mics?
You could do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Works better. Yeah.
Work?
You got it.
Okay, now it's working. Everybody hear me okay? I think this is the one that cuts out, maybe not. So I'm technologically challenged too, so I brought a different type of PowerPoint here. I think a lot of people in here maybe have been down and seen the jail, maybe even been on a tour. I know we did this with a lot of people city council members, a lot of our legislators and people. We invited people down to go to that. We don't do it so much now because of the COVID issues and stuff, and a lot of it is because of the overcrowding. So what I did is I brought two different floor plans here, and keep in mind this is double stacked. You're looking at it from the top, and yeah, this would actually be 2 layers because of the flooring. So back in 1987, we opened up the facility designed to hold 176 inmates. 10 years later, we had to add on to it because we didn't have enough room for all the people that we were housing in there. That's when we added 2 50-bed dormitories. Now these dormitories here hold about 75 people each. Total capacity of this facility right here, 286. Back in 2015, we went for a mill levy. The voters made it very clear that they did not want to raise taxes to add on to the jail. So they gave us a authority, gave the commissioners authority to go out and borrow the money. And we added on this facility over here, that's a 148-bed women's unit. And the reason we had to do that for the women was because of the parity. We had one small spot over here, holds about 36 has 36 cells in it, and it would hold, if we doubled it up, we could get up 78 female inmates in there. We actually started stacking them here in the day room because we didn't have room for them in the cells. That was going to come back and bite us. And so when I went to the commissioners and we talked to people around the country that had different facilities, we decided that we had to provide the parity for the women. You'll see here there's no recreation here for them other than one small room here, then they could get in there one at a time. Now they have, over here, they have several recreation areas. They didn't have any place that they could go get fresh air. Now they do. So just with that little bit of information about the jail, you can ask me questions about it later, but I went ahead and put together I guess more of a write-up here, because I get off track. I see squirrels easily, you know, running off to the side. So just to give you a little bit more information, when I took over as sheriff in 2011, one of the biggest issues involving the sheriff's office was the overcrowded jail. At the time, the capacity of our jail was 286 beds. That included 38 cells for women. It's common to double bunk these cells. In addition, we'd put bunks on the women's day room. And most recent population in that, before we rebuilt on, was well over 100 all the time. 78 beds, going over 100. The remaining 248 beds were designated for men and includes maximum security unit. That's right here. This is our classification unit right here. That's where the worst of the worst are, or those that need protective custody. They might be a witness to something. They might be a co-conspirator. We have to keep them separate. So most of these bunks in here are kept single bunked. We can't put people together in there, or very seldom we can. In 2011, 2012, I initiated 2 programs in Yellowstone County to help reduce the number of inmates being booked into the facility. The 24/7 program, which was allowed by the legislature, required twice daily testing of DUI offenders. That keeps them out of jail as long as they didn't test positive for alcohol. We still do that today. And then we started another program, the inmate labor detail. But in 2012, we had a record number of bookings in the Yellowstone County Detention Facility. And when I say bookings, these are people brought in, fingerprinted, logged into the system, and they might be there overnight, they might be there for longer. But in 2012, we did over 10,000 offenders being booked into the facility. So imagine that, 10,000 people processed through the jail in 365 days. That takes a very dedicated staff and qualified staff, but they still did it. So by then I was working on a new program that was the Sheriff's Labor Detail that allowed me to put potential inmates, instead of putting them in the jail, we'd put them to work in local nonprofits. They had to meet a certain criteria. It's spelled out by law what they could and could not do, or who could not be a part of the program. But for every 8 hours that they put in, whether it be at family services or something like that, they get 2 days credit that they're not sitting in jail. That's part of their sentence, and they get to use that up by helping people in the community. So with these programs and with the with the overcrowding and stuff, we couldn't let near as many people into the jail. The numbers started going down. So from 10,000, we started going down to 9, 8, 7 and stuff, and the numbers kept going down. But keep this in mind, in 2020, the bookings were at 4,908. That's how many people were booked into the jail. The population was still over 500. In 2015, several years ago, the population, 514. And this is in an email, and it's interesting enough because this was an email that I had with Director Gutkin when he was a sheriff. We started talking about what was going on in the communities and stuff. I have to say one thing here before I forget it is, I worked with the Director of Department of Corrections when I came in as sheriff, and we tried to do what we could to reduce the number of state inmates in our jail, and that is something that Director Gutkin has done. He's reduced it by about 2/3 the number of people that we have in there, so he's done a fantastic job for us. So again, like I said, we had 10,000 bookings in 2012. Population was still up around 500. We had less than half of that in 2020. The population is still up around 500. That tells me there's something wrong with the system. And you keep talking or hearing people talk about the criminal justice system. If we're getting 10,000 people through the system and we have a population of 500, now we can't get 5,000 people through the system without lowering the population. There's something wrong. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the stuff that you're reading about in the paper here recently, talking about the public defender's office, the people being shipped into our community that are violating the law and becoming another problem with us. I like the numbers that Director Gutkin gave us. I'll be honest with you, I was probably one of the people that thought that maybe we were getting more than our share. And maybe we are. I don't know. So it was back in 2015, and I picked 2015 for a couple of reasons. That's when I talked to the previous director of the Department of Corrections there. We had 90 DOC inmates in our facility that needed to go somewhere. And it was not uncommon for me to call him every week and say, get some of your people out of our jail. Back then, it cost us $76.94 a day to house an inmate in our facility. Based on the operating costs of our facility and a formula that was provided by the state from the Department of Corrections, that's what it was determined to cost us. And I was told that it cost less to house them in the jails than it did cost to house them in the prison. But also in 2015, the legislature put a cap on what they would pay to house their inmates in your jail. And that cap was $69. So it cost us $76.94, they're gonna pay us $69. We didn't really have anything we could do about it. We still keep track of it to this day. There was $72.50 available if they found out they couldn't get enough beds. I think I'm the only sheriff that went after that extra, couple of dollars there so we could get it, and they did approve it. Later, the legislature went back and took that away. So when you do the math, not uncommon back then to have 90 inmates in the jail. To house them at our cost us $6,900. However, the state would only pay $6,200 per day for 90 inmates. That's $21,000 a month that the citizens in Yellowstone County were paying for state inmates because they aren't paying their fair share. Again, that's something that we need to look at. So also in 2015, all this stuff was going on in 2015, we asked for a relatively small mill levy from the local citizens and the voters to add a 100-bed jail addition onto the jail. That got shot down. Again, like I said earlier, the people in our community don't want to pay higher taxes to build onto the jail. I think maybe there might be room to discuss that a little bit more, but that's the way it was back then. Again, I mentioned that they did approve allowing us to borrow the money to build on, and in 2018, we opened the 148-bed women's unit. Again, that's this one right here. Talked about the newspaper articles we're seeing. One of the things that we're having a big problem with is getting enough employees. Everybody has that problem. We have a hard time filling the jail with qualified staff. We're down about 15 employees right now. They're doing a great job keeping up with it. We have people stepping up, working double shifts, and that's just what we have to do to make the facility run. Again, exploring expansion. You know, I think there's a lot of people talking about building, adding on to the jail, exploring, doing that. And that's not just here. That's all around the state and probably around the country. We're not the only jail in the state that's overcrowded. And again, a lot of it has to do with getting people through the system. And again, I think that justice reinvestment that people are talking about, that is one of the things that we have to take a strong look at. I guess in closing, because I just want to leave more time for some questions and stuff here, that if we're going to look at some of the problems that we have and, you know, building a bigger jail, if we don't fix the criminal justice system itself and how it works, we're just going to have bigger jails that are going to be full. And so, with that, next.
Thank you, Sheriff. We appreciate it. And our final speaker is Ed Zink.
I would tell you that I am not technologically challenged, but that would guarantee that something's not going to work, so I'm not going to do that. There you go.
If anybody else needs a card or has one to turn in, then
All right, good evening. Billings is my hometown. I have family here for generations. What I see happening now to my town is unacceptable and unwelcome. And it gives me a lot of encouragement to see all of you in this room, because you are people with influence and expertise and experience and the ability to change this, and that's what's needed. So I want to say thank you for being here. What I want to do tonight from the perspective of a prosecutor and a career prosecutor is talk a little bit about just some numbers and experiences, a couple of war stories, about what we're seeing and, in our opinion, why we're seeing it. Scott Twido, the county attorney, wanted to be here tonight. Unfortunately, he couldn't be. Should I use a handheld?
Let's swap to it, yeah.
turn that one off.
I'm going to mute this one.
All right.
Here, got to turn that on.
Okay. Okay. A little bit in order here. The sheriff and the chief both just talked about this, but the fact that our detention facility is over capacity is really the root cause of so many problems here in Billings and Yellowstone County. The city police, the highway patrol, the sheriff's office, they do, frankly, an exceptional job on behalf of the citizens of Billings. We do not have an interdiction problem. We do not have any difficulty finding the offenders, solving the crimes, completing complex and thorough investigations, and making arrests. All of the problems that we're seeing flow downstream from that moment in time. One of the starting points is the fact that our detention facility is far, far too small for what we're seeing. Offenders that can't be booked into the jail commit new crimes, and they do so very, very quickly, and they create new, additional, different victims. You can do the math very quickly and see how that creates its own logjam and becomes a self-perpetuating problem in the criminal justice system. In Yellowstone County, quite frankly, our biggest problem is the onslaught of repeat felony criminal offenders. Every part of the system is taxed, from defense attorneys to courts to trial dockets to police officers, by a relatively identifiable population of people who will reoffend at every opportunity. And there's lots of reasons for that. That's a long conversation, but it doesn't make it any less real. Our law enforcement is stretched thin. They're doing the very, very best that they can, but I don't believe that's where our problems lie. I think our police and our deputies and our troopers do an amazing job. My team in the Yellowstone County Attorney's Office is overburdened. We're doing the very best we can. So are our counterparts in the defense bar, particularly in the State Office of the Public Defender. We're keeping up as well as we can. Court calendars are absolutely packed with cases every single day, every single trial setting. I see some people in here who are part of that system who have to wrestle with the difficulties in the sheer numbers. Why is this? Why is this a Billings problem? And it really is. Frankly, if you take out Billings and Helena from the numbers in the state of Montana, crime in the state of Montana has actually gone down. You put Billings and Helena back in the mix, and it goes way back up. Our numbers in Yellowstone County equal the next 5 counties combined. So when we talk about this being a problem of some seriousness, reaching a crisis time in our community, it's now. What's different about Billings? Well, of course, we're the largest city in the state. We're a population center that sits beside 2 interstates. As Stacey talked about, a lot of the methamphetamine and other drug trafficking comes right through here because the highways are right here. A lot of it stops here, and a lot of it goes right through. But the criminal activity flows with it. We have a women's prison. We have the 2 largest pre-release centers in the state. We have sex offender treatment facilities. We're one of only 2 places in the state, and really, if you're honest about it, really the only place in the state that provides every possible service for every possible offender that can be placed here. We are, in effect, a one-stop shop for whatever our criminal offenders in the system need. Of course, we're going to attract more of them. This has already been touched on a little bit, but we have seen a relatively new explosion in sober living houses. This is a new problem that, if it was anticipated, no one was talking about it, and all of a sudden it's here. We'll come back to that. This has been touched on a little bit by a couple of the previous speakers. What happened in 2017 may have been unintended, but it wasn't without warning. Many of us in the criminal justice system as professionals were screaming from the rooftops, you can't do this. This is going to cause untold problems and untold costs. Well, we were right. And so here we are. And how do we fix it? 2 big things happened in the 2017 legislature. We used to have an offense called the persistent felony offender. It meant if a person kept committing felonies in a 5-year period, 2 in a relatively short span of time, it gave prosecutors and courts a tool for meaningful punishment. And that was taken away. There was a perception among some that it was being overused. The reality is that designation was dismissed and taken off the case in over 90% of the cases in which it was filed. Very few people actually went to prison because of PFO designation. But now it requires 3 felony offenses, and one of the 3 has to be violent. So if someone steals your truck, it's a $60,000 Silverado, and then because they're let out of jail because they don't get booked in the first place, they steal someone else's vehicle, and then they break into someone's house and steal, let's make it a low number, $5,000 worth of their property, 3 separate victims. Because there's no violent offense, that individual would not even be designated a persistent felony offender, and I'm here to tell you, in Yellowstone County, they wouldn't go to jail. We see stolen vehicles in Yellowstone County just about every day. These folks are not going to jail. The picture you saw that the chief put up, that's my case. That individual is on probation when that individual committed all those offenses. I'm not going to name who that person is. Has more coming, was let out of jail, and shockingly missed a court date and now faces bail jumping charges at the end of December. And so now instead of 5 cases, this person also committed another theft from another merchant with another victim because they were not in a jail. I have to talk to those people now. Pretty soon this individual is going to have 7 cases. If you have 5 cases pending on a given day for trial, and they're arrested for something else, case number 6 comes in, what do you think happens to the previous 5? They're continued. And this is why the crisis in our system right now has to do with repeat felony offenders. The second thing that was very unfortunate in 2017 is the discretion of the expert probation officers that we have in the state of Montana was in large part taken away from them. Instead of them being able to individually decide based upon their individual intimate knowledge of an offender what should be done with that person, instead they were obligated to plug things into a matrix. And once they get to a certain point, only then may they take action. Well, what does that mean in practicality? In Billings, Montana, felons on probation in supervision in our town right now, today, have tested positive with their probation officer for methamphetamine, and exactly nothing happened. Testing positive for methamphetamine, might surprise you, is not actually a new crime. We don't call it possession of methamphetamine when it's in someone's system. That's also the answer to why we file cases when we find residue amounts, because it is a way to begin to interdict, seek treatment, seek help. So all the revocations that we have now, and by the way, I'm using some terms here, a revocation is when we bring a convicted felon back into the criminal justice system for some sort of violation of their sentence. Revocations in Yellowstone County now occur just about 100% of the time upon the commission of a new felony offense, not before. I'll show you what those numbers look like. The chief showed you a really good chart of increases in crime. I hope, because it's a big part of what I do, that what we experienced in 2020, where we had 22 homicides, is an outlier, and I hope it remains an outlier for however long I am privileged enough to do this as a career. We had quite a bit fewer in 2021. But the closest thing we have to a central depository that Mr. Usher talked about, which is extremely important, is the FBI statistics. And they've told us that since 2017, violent crime here has gone up about 70%. So if it feels like from the seat of your pants as you watch the news and read the newspaper, talk to your friends, maybe have something happen to you or a loved one, if it feels like things are worse, it's because they're worse. Looking back a little bit historically, this is what the Yellowstone County Attorney's Office has filed in felony cases going back about a decade. In 2010, we filed 677, and you can see a slow, gradual increase every year, or about the same. But in 5 years, that number had essentially doubled without a whole lot of increase in collateral resources. We didn't get a whole lot more judges. We didn't get a whole lot more prosecutors. There were not a whole lot more police officers, right? Every part of the system became stressed. 2016, that number creeped up again. And in 2020, when all sorts of parts of the world sort of came off axis a little bit, we filed over 1,700 felony cases in Billings. So a little behind the curtain discussion here. At the county attorney's office, we're responsible and solely responsible for all felony offenses that occur within Yellowstone County. We also have concurrent jurisdiction for misdemeanor offenses, and we take those when they tag along with felony offenses or when they occur in Yellowstone County but outside the city limits of Billings. Monday through Friday, we have something we call crime time. And that is when command staff from law enforcement and all the agencies that we serve, so the Billings Police Department, the Laurel Police Department, the Yellowstone County Sheriff, and the Montana Highway Patrol, and some other investigators, sometimes DCI, bring us the felony arrests from the day before. Or they bring completed investigations that maybe have taken some period of time, and they ask us for what we call a warrant request. So we track every single case that is presented by law enforcement every single day. And so what these numbers tell us is really, really remarkable. There's 3 columns here by month. The first column is the total number of felony cases that were referred to our office in that given month. The next column tells us whether any of these individuals have been in front of a district court judge before, which means they've had a conviction for a felony offense. The third column is whether they have an active pending felony case at the time they came in. So what you can tell by these numbers, pretty consistent from month to month, is just under half. I think it's actually about 42% if my math is right. of all the felony offenders that come in are previously convicted felons. So when I say that our problem is a repeat felony offender problem, this is kind of what I'm looking at. More concerningly is that third column. In calendar year 2020, 390, almost 400 of the felons that came to our office with a completed investigation or were arrested in custody had an actual active pending felony case in front of a Yellowstone County district judge at the time. Why does that matter? It means they're not in jail. It means the judge has either allowed them out of jail or set a bond amount that they were able to post. They were given a piece of paper that orders them to do certain things and not do other things. First thing on that piece of paper says, obey all laws. Don't drink any alcohol. Don't use drugs. You may not possess a firearm. The picture in the Conoco storage unit that you saw there from Chief St. John, that offender, as I mentioned, was not only a convicted felon on supervision in Billings, Montana. That individual also had multiple pending felony cases before that one happened. That means almost one in every five of every case that we receive is an offender with an active felony prosecution. That means that while they're under a court order, thou shalt not do that, they're creating new victims and new problems and new log jams in the system. The testimony, if I have it correct, at the 2017 legislature was that parolees will reoffend at a rate of about 71%. They're a particularly high-risk population to reoffend, parolees in particular. That's concerning, and it affects us disproportionately. So what does this look like in practical terms? I thought it would be useful just to grab a day out of thin air, and so I picked Monday this week. These are the felony criminal trial settings in front of one judicial department out of 8 in Yellowstone County. There's 61 cases on that screen, and I know the print is really small. What I will tell you is a significant portion of those 61 cases are comprised of just a few offenders. One has 5 active cases. This is one department. The other department had 15 trials. It was a light setting because, of course, it's January. So we had 76 felony jury trial settings on one day. For January this month, we have 331 felony jury trial settings in Billings across 8 departments. Now, if one of these defendants has multiple settings, and if we're able to get that case to actually go to trial, if a public defender is prepared to go, and if they've worked the case, 60 cases have to move. Where do they go? They go to that judge's next court calendar, usually. So those 60, if we try one, will bounce down to that judge's setting in February, which, as you might accurately predict, is not empty. You see the problem. If you've got incredible vision, you'll note that several of the cases come from 2019, some from 2020. I'd say about 75% of them are from 2021. Also wanted you to see a snapshot of what YCDF looks like. And so the best I could do was getting the current data, which gave us DOC numbers as well as an actual number. So January 6th, last week, 525 inmates in the facility, designed for a maximum capacity of 435. 122 or 23% of those inmates were DOC inmates or holds. The director, this director, in only 1 year, has radically transformed the quality of the work provided by the Department of Corrections. That's a fact. The inmates that are DOC holds, once their pending cases are done, are now being moved out in a timely fashion from our local facility to the various state facilities around the state, and that's a good thing. The fact of the matter is, command staff that I talked to said this is a very normal number. This is not an outlier snapshot. This was actually a very middle-of-the-road heartland number. What that means is, despite the DOC moving their people along once they're sentenced, they're being replaced by others, which means on any given day in Yellowstone County, somewhere between 1/5 and 1/4 of the inmates are DOC holds. Now, what I want to know or note for you is that these are DOC holds with other pending charges, because that's really what it takes for this population of people to get back into a jail. So these people all have new felony charges. And they're in different percentages of actual parolees versus probation violations and whatnot. And then there's a handful of DOC holds because they're being placed in the facility before they move on to the prison. But these are the numbers that cause quite a bit of our concern. Wrap up? Okay. All right. Did anyone hear about what happened in November down at Jake's downtown? That individual was out of Missoula County. He was not Billings talent. He's actually not included in this population because he wasn't a DOC hold. He's only in the facility on new offenses. So real fast, some terminology here so we know what we're talking about. Parolees, conditional release inmates, and probationers. These are the three type of felony offenders that we have within our community. Parolees, this is a term defined in the code. This is a person who was incarcerated in the state prison or the women's prison and has been released for whatever reason back into the community. They have a strict level of supervision, and if they violate, they do not go back before a court. That is handled internally within the department, and they typically would go straight back to prison. Person has to serve in Montana 1/4 of their sentence before they become eligible for parole. They're considered an inmate and legally serving their sentence even while they're outside the facility. So that's what parole is about. Conditional release is not parole, but it's typically what happens when a person is, what they talked about before, a DOC commitment. A commitment to the Department of Corrections is, for all intents and purposes, a community-based placement. So if a person is sentenced to 5 years to the Montana DOC, they will be in Billings, or they will be in another community with the facilities. Even though they are an inmate in the property of the department, they're in the communities. It is very difficult, and I want you to hear this. I'm not asking for more people to be sent to prison. That's not what this is about. It is very difficult to actually get someone sent to prison in Yellowstone County. We have to ask for it in so many words. We have to ask for a Montana State Prison commitment, and it typically only happens with a series of previous felony convictions or something extremely violent. The rest of the people are not. They're going to probationary sentences. They are going to different types of sentences. Sober living houses, we talked about this. Why are they a problem? Well, they're unregulated. Really, the only regulation in Billings is that they have a business license. They're not subject to general landlord-tenant laws. They've multiplied since 2019 at an alarming rate. And I think this number is actually low. I heard tonight in a conference that the number in Billings is now 40, not 34 as I have it on the slide. No other city in Montana has more than 6. If an offender gets booted out for whatever reason from a sober living facility, there's no requirement that the Department of Corrections be notified, other than the offender is obligated to notify their supervising officer that their residence address has changed. So the effect of all this is that right now in Yellowstone County, we have more than 2,200 offenders on probation, parole, or conditional release here in the county. This does not include any of the inmates in pre-release centers, which is either passages or alternatives. It does not include the inmates in the Montana Women's Prison. It does not include inmates in other facilities, and it does not include those who are on conditional discharge. Conditional discharge is the early termination of a sentence with no supervision. And every time someone from this population offends, there's a new cost, potentially a new victim, and we start the process over again. And we know that this population of people reoffends at a high rate, much higher than other offenders. We've had 4 homicides in the last 2 years from people in this population. a young woman who was brutally murdered, this case was mine, in front of her 3 kids, and another individual who killed 3 other people before taking his own life. And that's the real cost. But with the cooperation of everyone in this room and some courage and maybe some out-of-the-box thinking, we can fix this, and we have to fix this. The people who put us in these positions and put us in positions of influence demand it, and they deserve it. So thank you for being here tonight.
Use this good mic over here at the table. Looks like we've got a bunch of them, so we'll try to get through them, and we'll do the whole shared mic concept here. I'll try to use this one at the podium for asking the questions, and then just ask that you pass them around, or if you want to try both of the mics and we see how it works out. But I'll bring this one over and bring it to the sheriff. You'll get the first question.
Oh, cool.
Take it off mute and hope that it doesn't squawk back. Okay, this is a sheriff question for the sheriff. How does the overcrowded jail impact community safety, and what is going to be done about it? And as a follow-up to that, I'm going to go ahead and say the whole thing as written. I routinely issue warrants, and the local law enforcement officers won't pick people up because there's no room for offenders, from Judge Harada. She doesn't mind that I said that.
No, that's fine. You know, I can tell you that right now, based on everything that you've seen here, we've got a 434-bed jail with over 500 people in it, well over 500 people, sometimes up as much as 550. We have, I would say, probably well over 1,000 warrants out there that could be served at any one time. We do everything we possibly can if it's a violent offender. Well, I won't even say everything we possibly can. We'll put them in. They will go to jail. If we were to try to put everybody in that we have contact with in a day, it would be impossible, simply impossible. There's not enough room in the prison to put the people in that for all the warrants that we have. I can't tell the judge anything other than the truth, and that's what I'm here to tell you. If the jail was 1,000 beds, it'd fill up in a week. So there has to be a better way. And some of the stuff that you heard people talking about here today about why we can't do some of the things we need to do, I'm a big proponent and a big believer. There are certain people that belong in prison, and they're not there. So something has to be done, and again, some of the things that you heard today are probably some of the answers. So, Judge Harada, wherever you are, I can only tell you the truth. I don't think I told you anything you don't already know. So.
My issue was that Mr. Zinn said sometimes it's judges releasing people, and I'm trying to express that it's not always me releasing somebody into the community, it's that I can't get them picked up.
Oh, yeah. You know, and if there's somebody that absolutely needs to be in there, in fact, if a judge says this person will go to jail, they'll go to jail. A lot of the warrants that we're seeing out there right now are for contempt because there's probably 5 or 10 warrants before that for non-appearance, and people are not showing up. We can pick them up, give them a notice to appear. If we try to put them in the jail, again, my staff down at the jail will turn them away. If you tried to put over 100 in there, I shouldn't say over 100, but if you tried to put somebody in there when we're already at a capacity of over 100 in there, we've already been, in fact, one of the things that brought up the thing about adding the women's unit there was the ACLU. When I first became sheriff, I think one of the first letters I got was from the ACLU. What are you going to do about the overcrowding at the jail? Well, we did everything we could. When the voters shot down adding on to the jail back in 2015, we went back to you and asked for the ability or the permission to borrow the money, and we did that. We did what we could. Haven't heard from them since. But this problem isn't going to go away as long as there's criminals out there. and there's people still being released into the community, we're still going to have that problem, so.
Okay, the next question, hold on to the mic.
Okay.
Here's the question. Can we not sharply increase criminal penalties so that criminals may think twice before landing in Yellowstone County or any place in Montana?
I think that's a question for the county attorney. I don't make the determination on the penalties and those types of things, unless Judge Harada would like to answer that one. So. Yeah, I mean, as far as, I suppose we can. I mean, if we're going to increase penalties.
Look,
What's that?
Barry's trying to. No.
Well, no. Well, I mean, I think there's other ways too. I mean, monitoring, like GPS monitoring, stuff like that. We're doing a lot of that stuff now. I think part of the problem is, again, like I said, we have people in our communities that belong in prison. And they're not there. Again, it has to do with the system. I said that earlier. We booked over 10,000 people back in 2012 into our jail. Population was up around 500 then, and we made the system work. This was before some of the changes that were made through the legislature. Now we have 5,000 people that we booked in here just a year ago, and we still have 500 people in there, and we can't get people out. We can't get them, I mean, they're sitting there. We have 3 people that have been sitting in there since 2019. We have probably close to 20 that have been sitting in there since 2020. That shouldn't happen. They got to get through the system. And again, like I said, you read a lot about this in the paper. OPD, big problem. You know, trying to get people attorneys so that they can get representation to get them out, whether it be on bond, whether it be OR or whatever. So.
Okay, the next one will go to the chief. It's a 2-part question.
Sheriff's doing well.
And the person's asking the question, the request, why can't we get a list of residences where released criminals are housed?
Well, I do believe some of those are available. The sheriff maintains violent offender and sex offender website, so that's available there. I think that the sober housing, I'm not sure if that was public, but county attorney found all those. So yes, it's available if you know where to look.
Okay, terrific. And then the second part, when buying a home, why can't I get an answer if the house was previously a meth or a marijuana location?
From the realtor?
Oh, boy, yeah. Or the inspector, right?
Representative says that mandatory disclosure is required by law. I knew that. So,
Okay, great.
Yeah, that was
this
it.
is posed as a within the city limit question, so I guess we'll have you address this one. If someone is breaking into your home at night, what is the response time for an officer? How long does it take for an officer to typically respond?
Well, it depends where they're at. We get into this debate with the fire department all the time. They are responding from fixed locations, so they can kind of tell how long it takes to get. We're on patrol. We're out and about. I could be sitting in front of your house if something happened, and my response time would be immediate. But on average, where we're at right now, a 911 call in the city of Billings is about a 3-minute response time, which is pretty good. And that's not driving 100 miles an hour across town. This gets into appropriate staffing, where we have them deployed, so I don't have to have somebody drive all the way across town that fast. So
Okay.
We'll get there.
Okay. Another one for you, Chief. Is there a plan to address small crime in our community and the belief that nothing will be done to the criminal?
Yeah, absolutely. And the topic tonight was violent crime, but don't think for a second we don't have a problem with property crime. The burglaries, the vehicle thefts Mr. Zink talked about, criminal mischiefs, and then the things that really affect the quality of life for our citizens would be the behavioral issue, the transiency, all those type of things, and the mental health issue. and again, and we deal with all of those things. When people dealing with mental health issues, they do some crazy stuff, as you witnessed today. But they don't do what we've been talking about. That's usually that's a different population. And so the concept that we have, you may have heard it, kind of cliche, I guess, but in our world we call it a broken windows theory. And what that means is you don't let the little stuff go. You jump on the little stuff quickly, because if you don't, it turns into big stuff. And we have to be properly resourced, properly staffed in order to do that. Here on the public blight side of things, we partner with code enforcement. They handle stuff on private property that we can't. Graffiti is a great example. We need to get it cleaned up as soon as it happens, because if you don't, the criminals think they own it, and they don't own it. They don't own it. But if you let it go, then it's okay to break a window. If you let the window go, it's okay to break in the place. And next thing you know, the thing's on fire and you got, a mess. So that theory is part of our strategies to get after some of the little stuff too. This is important though. I mean, this stuff's unacceptable when somebody wants to bring a family to Billings, Montana, and we got numbers like this. And you all know that, this is a very small, there's a lot of them, but it's generally the same type of people doing the same type of thing. Billings is a great community. Overall, it's safe, great amenities, raise your family. We're dealing with a real myopic thing here. But it's affecting stuff. It's got the attention of our legislators, it's got the attention of our governor, and it's got the attention of our attorney general. Finally. Because I've always said there was a lot of cowboy boots up in Helena. And they really didn't care what's taking place in Gotham City here. Okay, well, we got their attention, so I'm so thankful that you have legislators here paying attention to help us with some of this stuff. And I got off track, thank you.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question is addressed to anyone, so I'll read the question and then hand off the mic as
Do I
you
get
see
to
fit.
pick? Yeah.
What are we doing to clean up the homeless population? We can't enjoy certain parts of the community due to them.
Yeah, that's a DEA problem there.
We're all in sober living.
Yeah, well, you invite them to the library when there's a big public meeting going on. That's one thing that we do. Well, again, this is, a local issue that truly affects the livability in Billings. And it's a problem that we've recognized. But again, you're asking me, since when did it become law enforcement's problem to deal with mental illness, homelessness, co-occurring addiction issues? All right, when I went to school, let's fight crime and evil. Okay, so we are really struggling to find, again, the capacity. The jail is not the right spot. The ER is not the right spot. And I think you've seen our statistics. We got 90-something people that cost you $10 million in unrecoverable money that's requiring public safety responses. So we are working very closely on several fronts with mental health, social services, crisis center, the hospitals, all of those that provide the back end stuff. Okay, and I think Ed or Mr. Zink mentioned it, enforcement is not the problem. It's the back end is where the capacity really lacks. And so for this population, clean and sober housing, jobs, the consistent counseling, the follow-up. What do you think happens when they go through a 60-day program and they give them a roadmap and an apple and kick them out the door? Is that a recipe for success? So we need to build that on the back end. And so part of our plan is, again, get the cops out of it. Get the fire department out of it. We're working on a co-responder model with the crisis center. We're working to build partnerships where we have people places to take people and give a soft handoff. Deputies and police officers love the crisis center because we drive up and say, here you go, and leave. Okay? That's what we're looking for. That's what they do for a living. Okay, and so that's what we have going. But again, it's a very complicated problem. But for this talk here, those people on the screen are the ones that's causing the issues.
Right.
Don't think that we're, out working on this, but again, it's complicated, very, very complicated. But again, no excuses, we get it, and we're gonna fix it. Part of our strategic program, our plan with the safety levy was to improve downtown safety or the perception thereof, right? It's there. And safety levy put us in a position to do a better job at that. And that's what we're rolling out with, so.
Okay, great, thank you. The next one is a little sidestep, and if they don't mind answering a question, there's a question for the parole board. Is that okay, Steve? I'll bring the mic back. And I'll walk and talk at the same time. We have members from the state parole board here tonight. What changes can you share that the board has done on the benefit of Billings?
Well, I think first and foremost, we'd like the community to know that we have 3 of the 5 parole board members for this state that live in this community. And between the 3 of us, we have about 110 years of criminal justice experience. So I know, Chief, that makes us almost as old as you are. We're very guarded in our decision-making process, but people don't understand the parole board was professionalized in the 2017 legislature with the Justice Reinvestment Act. So that was probably, in my estimation, the best piece of legislation, thanks to some folks in this room that came from that. We have a retired district court judge of 12 years and a prosecutor of 20 out of our Butte office. We have a female public defender off the Rocky Boy Reservation out of Missoula. And then we have Darrell Bell, who was with the police department under Chief St. John's watch for a number of years and was the U.S. Marshal for 8 years. Mr. Patelis is the most recent appointee, who was the Chief U.S. District Probation Officer for the District of Montana. And I cut my teeth coming out of pre-release starting in '85 and spent 25 years as a parole officer. So I think, as the director witnessed today that we had lunch with the county attorney, there's lots of folks in this community we have great relationships with, but first and foremost, we have a commitment to this community. And I think the complexion of the parole board has changed drastically in the last year. And I think you can ask any one of our law enforcement partners in this room what the feedback is. You might ask the probation and parole staff. But there is viability through accountability, and you're not coming out. And as Mr. Zink referred to the parolees, I approve all the secure placement requests for parole violators across the state. And Mr. Zink is right. We have my estimation, about 80% of those folks are going back for the commission of new crimes. So we're not in the habit of rewarding criminal parolees committing new offenses in our communities with the freedom of being out in our communities to reoffend our population. So I think that's first and foremost what's changed drastically in the last year.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one is addressed to Chief St. John and/or Sheriff Linder. What is the best way to reduce the 93 individuals who collectively cost us $18.3 million every year? Are we slowly becoming Portland?
Touched on that a little bit. I hope we're not becoming Portland. There's a whole different culture and environment, to which I mentioned earlier, is that we have the support of the citizens, we have the support of the policy bodies across the board, and it's statewide, not just here in Billings. And so the goal is to divert those super users, 90-something of them, out of the justice system and into treatment facilities that are going to stick. And on the treatment side, that is our partners in mental health, in addiction, in counseling, in housing, in employment, and all of that. That's what's being worked on. There's Substance Abuse Connect, there's Coalition of Care, there's other entities working on the side, a lot of people working to provide sustainable solutions for this. In the meantime, part of our recommendations, with the survey that took place, the fire department, when we go out on presentations, is how come you bring the hook and ladder to a guy that's passed out on the sidewalk? That's all they have. And so they have retooled their response so you have the right tool for the right call. Again, efficiency and effectiveness to try to drive those costs down. But again, at the end of the day, if I go, I own that person. So to dust them off, send them down the road and have them get run over by a car, I own that. So we need to make sure that when we do dust them off, that they're safe, or we have the handoff to somebody that's going to get them the help that they need. Okay, now if the help takes, it takes. And there are other programs we can talk about.
Okay, great. The next one is for Barry and Brian. Well, they can share it off, however. The question is, what could be done to lower the recidivism rates in Montana?
So that is a great question. And in order to lower the recidivism rate, you actually have to know what the recidivism rate is. And I will tell you that the current definition that we've been running on for years is from a prison, released, and within 3 years back to a prison. And as you saw tonight, that is a very small number of the offenders that we are responsible for. So as the new director, we are looking at a new definition of recidivism, and that is rearrest, reconviction, reincarceration. The problem is, and you've heard it all through tonight, and I'll hand this over to Barry after I'm done, is all of our records management systems from the arrest on the ground through the entire criminal justice system are siloed. None of them communicate with one another. So we are currently working to set up a meeting with the Department of Justice because every single one of the arrests that come through these guys out on the street goes through DOJ. So that is where we can access that information, and then we can measure it. And I talked to the governor because he asked the exact same thing. I tell him, be careful because that number is going to be high. But at least then we have a baseline to work from to evaluate all of our programs and have measurable outcomes so we can actually see whether or not our programs that we're spending $46 million a year on are working. Representative.
I'm not sure I can add much, except for, besides the definition he mentioned of the 3 years, I think that different agencies actually had different definitions too. And besides the silos, if we can't get the right same definition, it doesn't matter if we brought that data together, we wouldn't get the right answer. So that's why we're big on the data and making sure that we get the right answers to the questions we have before we allocate the right resources. As the chief said, we get the right tool for the right job, but we have to have the right data to tell us what the tool is.
Okay, great. Next question is for Stacey. If marijuana dispensaries are legalized in Yellowstone County, do you expect this to lead to increased crime problems in Yellowstone County? And also, what crime types do you expect to increase, if you expect an increase?
The old marijuana question.
Yeah.
If it's going to be anything like what we've seen in Denver, we've seen in Colorado, we're going to see crime increase. Why? The type of THC levels that are in this marijuana is more of a psychosis type drug. It's not the marijuana of the 70s. I can date myself and talk about a movie called Richmond of Fast Times. Yes, Fast Times of Richmond, whatever. But anyway, and that character played a doper that was sitting on the couch and smoking marijuana, and the only thing he did was eat Doritos and was very humorous. Well, that's not the marijuana of today. Actually, marijuana shouldn't be called marijuana anymore. It should be called THC because it is a different type of drug. When I go into a house, I don't always see meth. When I go into another house, I don't always see fentanyl pills or heroin. But across the board, I always see marijuana. So we talk about mental health issues and our kids and what they're going through today. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years when we come back and we say, maybe we shouldn't have legalized that drug because studies show in Europe and different parts of the world that this marijuana, high THC levels, is leading to mental health issues if they're more prone to type of mental health. So I'm not a fortune teller, but again, reflect on the other locations that have legalized marijuana and look at their stats. It's well documented, especially in Denver. The Rocky Mountain HIDA has been on board from the get-go, and they've seen crime escalate. They've seen the black market go up. They've seen money laundering just out of control. So I am keeping my fingers crossed that maybe, hopefully, that's not going to be the case here, but I can't make any promises. We're just going to have to see and then come back collectively as a group and say, was this a good idea?
Okay, great. The next one is for Ed, so if you pass the mic down, please. The request is, please explain how the 2017 legislation caused the deterioration of our criminal justice system. How's that?
Is that all? That's too big a question and too generalized an answer. It didn't cause, in and of itself, the deterioration of the criminal justice system. It did not. What it did do was take away valuable tools and have some consequences that were predicted but not necessarily intended. And there's a way to do a pivot and to change a few of the things to bring some of those tools back into play and provide some of those tools again, such as persistent felony offender status, so that we can get a person on their second felony within 5 years rather than their third, and not have that second felony be a violent felony. Because quite frankly, if I have a new violent felony, I don't need anything else. That person is going to prison. We're trying to head those off before they happen. And I also think allowing our probation and parole officers who are already dealing with difficult caseloads to use their expertise and their knowledge of individual offenders and tailor the supervision so that it works and can work. Those two things in and of themselves would help us a lot. But if anyone got the impression that I said just those changes wrecked our system, there's a whole heck of a lot more of it in play. Mr. Hurd.
Difficult cases when you're dealing with the PDO to minimize the caseloads that you guys have, but that persistent felony offender, that PFO was a leverage tool that you folks utilized, and now it's taken away that component, which adds to the increased numbers of folks incarcerated and the slowdown of the prosecution, please.
Sure. So, in the old days, persistent felony offender provided a 5-year mandatory minimum up to a 100-year maximum replacement sentence. So if a person committed a second felony within 5 years, either within 5 years of release from prison or within 5 years of conviction for the first felony, we had now a 5-year mandatory minimum. So it was kind of a 2 strikes and you're in big trouble type of situation. It's not used as leverage so much as it is used to grab a hold of those escalating young felony offenders and essentially compel resolution in the cases that need to be resolved. But what we didn't do is employ it. And the other part of the PFO designation is it is strictly the province of the prosecutor to apply it. So we file some paperwork with the court. The court, if we meet our legal requirements, is then obligated to follow it. We also have the exclusive option to withdraw it. So it is something that is used in negotiation, and it can help reduce a logjam of cases. The problem is now there have to be 3 felonies, and one of the 3 within the 5-year span or in the criminal history has to be violent. And the violent offenders do tend to take care of themselves. They do tend to go to prison. So do the sex offenders, and that's the other component. But what about the person who was a serial burglar, who repeatedly victimized homes and businesses and property? Imagine if you had your car stolen and you're a single mother with kids and your car is stolen. And then imagine a car is stolen from a family who has 3 vehicles and has options. Those 2 populations of victims are affected completely differently, and we should be able to take that into account in how we hold these people accountable. But as it is now, we don't have that tool in place anymore, and it has really, really caused increased difficulty. And this is, Steve, you're correct. It has made it more difficult to resolve cases in cases that would have been resolved before. Additionally, where this used to play was when a person was on supervision at the time they're arrested for a new felony. PFO would apply in all of those circumstances, and it doesn't anymore, and it should. When someone's on felony supervision, they commit another felony, the consequences should be more significant, more stout. And I don't think that's a controversial statement at all. If it is, that means the repeat felony offender has good representation in our legislative body, and that's, you know, I'm just going to have to disagree with that.
Okay, thanks. Quick time check. It's 8:45. Checking, make sure people are good if we go just a little longer, 15, 20-ish minutes. Is that okay? Okay, we'll roll on. Whoever wants to answer this one. The Billings City Council passed a council initiative to pursue enforcing a cap on the number of parolees and pre-releases sent to Billings. Is there a state law or code to prohibit the city of Billings from pursuing this action?
Can you repeat that question? On what? I didn't hear the first part.
No. And that's per the county attorney who I met at lunch today.
Okay.
And just quickly, because we are trying to wrap up, that was one of the conversations that we had tonight at dinner with the city council who wrote that letter. And again, we are working collectively side by side with them as a partner.
Okay, Brian, another one for you. We know meth users commit a higher percentage of violent crimes than the criminal population as a whole. What percentage of meth users or dealers are released to Yellowstone County, given that over 50% of sober housing is here?
Boy, that's a great question. I have no idea. But I would be able to get that data through our data team and get back to you collectively, whoever's running the show here. We have a great team, but I have no idea what that number is.
We'll
Okay.
get you an email.
Okay.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
I just want everybody to know that the whole board now, some of the changes is, we really are not trolling anybody to sober living house as much as home. Until there's regulation and until there's some things done for oversight. So just so everybody might be a question, maybe to help the director out there.
Okay, I think this is another one right at you, Brian.
All right.
While it appears the distribution of offenders to Region 4 is equitable, considering Region 4 has the most convictions, considering the size of Region 4, 11 counties, is that large area of Region 4 concentrating the offenders in Billings because none of the other counties are getting any distribution? Is it fair to say Billings has the huge percentage of everything for Region 4?
Yes. And because obviously the resources are in the city. We can't send those people to Hardin or even Miles City for that matter.
Okay.
But they could come from Miles City.
I'm sorry, what?
But they could come from Miles City and Hardin and be aggregated here.
Yes.
Okay. This one says it's to DEA and Chief St. John and Sheriff Linder, but however we want to do this, it's another marijuana question. Basically saying, will the legalization of marijuana increase our crime rate? And what happened in Colorado? We kind of had this already, but
Yeah,
if
ask
there's anything
Nancy.
else you want to add to that? Chief St. John and Sheriff Linder. Looks like it says prior to a meeting held today, a judge and the district court judges here in Yellowstone County talked about going to a more federal style release or retain. How are you going to push back on this, knowing the majority will just be released? I'm sorry, that wasn't real clear.
Well, I know what they're talking about. It was in Yellowstone County, it's called a Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And so it's all the muckety-mucks in Yellowstone County and the justice system talking about stuff. And the presentation today was talking about pretrial. The assessments and all the stuff that, it's not law enforcement. But part of the discussion, it came up on whether somebody's released or not. They were trying to correlate it to what the federal system is, which is you're either in or you're out based on threat, propensity to flee. That was a discussion. To tabled, and I went to lunch. So that's all that was.
Okay, fair. I got the good mic. Oops. Let's try it this way again. Besides money, what can we as the community do to make it stronger, the community, so that people who commit crimes can have a better influence and a more successful life? I guess as a community, collectively as the community, what can we do to make things better?
Right, and that, that's one of the strategies we have, is you have to engage in community partnerships to deal with these issues. It's not okay to have non-fatal, gun violence in one's neighborhood. And when you have neighbors and communities that step up and are paying attention, taking care of each other, and in some cases, mentoring kids or high, people that have a propensity to offend, that's where we're most effective. It's a teamwork thing across the board. The public outreach, all of that type of stuff. Part of our enforcement, focused policing does just that. Again, the most dangerous people doing the most dangerous crime in the most dangerous area. That's who gets our attention. Okay, and then the other part of that is the focused deterrence, is that I say, I know you're going to do those three things, and you'd better not be doing those three things, because me and everybody in your family and the neighborhood is going to be jumping down your throat pretty quick. So that's how you engage the community. It is not law enforcement. Anybody up here can absolutely not do this by ourselves.
Ladies first.
Oh, yeah, please.
For the community can get involved in stuff like you're doing right now. Communicate with each other. Elections have consequences. Know who you're voting for that's going to give you important power, and so that you know where they are when it comes to crime and laws and stuff like that. Get involved with your neighbors. Start talking to them. Know who your next door neighbors. If you have rental homes in the close vicinity, get to know them and find out if they are drug dealers coming in, or if there's issues and stuff like that. So as a community, y'all have much power, but y'all have to be active also. We can't, too many times we've been turning the other eye and not being proactive. This is a time that y'all make your voices be heard.
It almost sounds like, to one extent, neighborhood watch, but oh wait, that went away.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say something like Neighborhood Watch, but I can tell you 30 years ago when I was undercover, if I was undercover and I went into a drug neighborhood, they knew I was there. All the neighbors, all the druggies in that neighborhood knew I was there before I got to the door. And that's what we need to do. I can tell you my neighborhood, and I live way out of town, so it's not quite a neighborhood, but if a car comes down our road that it doesn't look familiar, everybody in our neighborhood is texting or Facebooking right away. Somebody got a guest or whatever. And you guys need to do that with your neighbors. I saw somebody else, another friend of mine's community, do that recently about somebody was in the backyard at this moment, and next thing you know, the next neighbor said,
I guess we ran out of battery.
next neighbor said, it's in my yard now, and police are on the way, because he said 3 minutes. 20 minutes, actually, the county sheriff's are at least 20 minutes. The other thing is, this past session, we did pass basically concealed carry without a permit. And I suggest get trained, know how to use that weapon, carry that weapon. Did we have a carjacking yesterday or the day before? Or 2, that's right, 1 each day. Let me tell you, if that person carjacks me, they're not going to live, because I'm going to fear for my life, and they're going to go see God that day.
But don't leave your weapons in a car overnight.
No.
Or your purse. Or computer. Or your gun.
So I would agree with everything that was just said. Just looking around this room and the people that I know and the type of questions that you all are asking, consider some compassion. Consider within your churches or within your businesses. They have Celebrate Recovery programs where people who really actually are trying hard to turn their lives around after making some bad choices need help, and consider being an AA sponsor or just being a safe place for people to talk to in a recovery program. Consider within your businesses taking a leap of faith and hiring someone who's on supervision. Get to know their probation officer. You might find yourself with someone who's well-trained and works really hard. You might find the other way too, who's a problem, but when you ask, what can you do besides money? Think outside the box. Consider options, because we have the ability, all of us in this room, to make an incredible difference outside of our jobs. And if there's 50 people in here, there's probably 100 different sets of skills that are meaningful and could be really valuable to someone who's trying. And be available to watch kids. Any number of things. That's something without money that could make a huge difference in someone's life, and you'll never know. Some of my proudest moments as a prosecutor, I run into people at my church that I sent to prison 15 years ago. And they talk to me now, they're married, they've got jobs. They were grateful that they were treated with respect. They were grateful that someone slapped them upside the head and put them on a different path. Those are the best days, not the sending to the prison.
Okay, there will be one final question, especially since our microphones are failing. Hand it off to Barry. And just as a pre-wrap, just to let you know, I mentioned that would be the last question that we'll ask, but there are other cards that were submitted, so we will ask of our panelists here that if we can email the questions to them to get an email response, and we'll work to get it posted so you can go out and look through Facebook or whatever media, and we'll get those answers out there. Okay, for Barry. Without DOC commits, where will offenders go? Where and by whom will they be assessed, and what impact will this have on prison populations?
So I think that actually came from the director. Because he didn't ask for a card, but he asked me the same question after I brought it up today. Again, because I continue to bring it up, and actually it seems like every time I bring it up, I get more people supporting. It's not about, to me, it's not about where they're going to go and increasing the population, because in my eyes, it works in other states. Again, we're the only state that does this. So there's plenty of states, and like I said, I travel with NCSL, and I get to go to other states and see. And I also come from law enforcement, so I got to see there too. There's ways to make sure the judges understand. I mean, the excuse was, judges don't know if there's an open bed in, what's it called, Watch East. Oh, okay, provide the judge with that every day. Here's where the beds are available. Is it DOC? Is it Watch East? Is it this program? But they, of course, they order. I mean, it's gonna take a couple hours to explain this, but they can order an evaluation by DOC. So they get to go to the assessment center, and they have that up in Missoula, where they get assessed, and they wait until DOC decides where they go. Well, they do the assessment, then they report back, and right now we actually passed a law that they only had to send a letter to the judge saying that we're changing your recommendation, and I thought that didn't go far enough. So when they come back with the recommendation, then the judge can actually do the real sentence after they have the recommendation from DOC of this is what type of treatment or what kind of diversion program or what kind of other mental health services, or they know they really are violent and they need to go to prison. So the judge gets that, and the judge, again, we're voting for these judges to make decisions. I'm not hiring a bureaucrat to decide where a murderer goes. I mean, there's a difference, isn't? Do you want to pay somebody that's making $25 an hour, or whatever somebody at DOC makes, to make a decision where somebody that may be a violent offender goes? No, we pay the judges to make those decisions for us. We elect those judges to do that. If we give them the information, they can make the same decisions, but maybe better because of their training and their background, and because they have the trust and faith of the people behind them. If we don't like their decisions, then we vote them out the next time they're up for election. We can't get rid of a DOC employee if we don't like their decisions, right? Like the person at Jake's. You know, I don't know 100% of that situation, but was that a DOC person that ended up in Billings? And that DOC person made the wrong decision and they ended up in Billings when they shouldn't have been? They should have been in prison? I don't know that factually. I'm just hypothetically. If that was a bad decision by somebody in DOC, we can't fire them. That's the point of getting rid of DOC. And again, I've been to several states talking about this, and they cannot believe that we actually have this system. It's ridiculous to have bureaucrats making these decisions.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, that wraps up the structured questions. Thank you to our panelists. Really appreciate your time. And as a final thought, we will try to get a link to the Community 7 videoing of this if anybody wants to watch it at another time.